The year was 1878, and Deadwood, Dakota Territory, had grown from a lawless mining camp to something resembling civilization, though that resemblance was often paper-thin. I arrived on a dusty stagecoach, my federal marshal's badge tucked safely. In my inner pocket, my true purpose known only to myself. My superiors in Washington had received troubling reports about a particular establishment, the Golden Nugget Saloon, which was suspected of being more than just a watering hole for miners and cowboys. I'd enter the saloon daily, taking the same corner table, ordering a single whiskey I barely touched and watching. Everyone simply knew me as James Carter, a quiet Easterner with a mysterious past. None suspected I was documenting every illegal transaction, every crooked game, and, most importantly, tracking the movement of stolen army supplies that somehow found their way through this establishment. Another whiskey, Mr. Carter? Sarah, the young barmaid with tired eyes that had seen too much for her 20-some years, placed a fresh glass before me. "Thank you kindly, Miss Sarah," I replied, sliding a coin across the worn wooden table. "Busy. Night? Always is when the new shipments come in," she said without thinking, then caught herself. "I mean, when the miners get paid." That slip confirmed what I'd suspected. The Golden Nugget wasn't just a saloon. It was the hub of an operation stealing military supplies intended for frontier forts, leaving our soldiers vulnerable while enriching the pockets of men like Emmett Dawson, the saloon's owner. Dawson was a mountain of a man with a carefully groomed mustache and a smile that never reached his eyes. He had one hand in every illegal enterprise in the territory, but he was careful, connected, and considered untouchable by the local authorities, many of whom drank for free at his establishment. "Carter!" Dawson's voice boomed across the saloon. As he approached my table later that evening, "You've been warming that chair for weeks now. A man sitting that long ought to be either gambling or sharing his story." "Not much of a gambler," I said quietly, "and my story isn't worth telling." "Everyone's got a story," he persisted, pulling up a chair uninvited. "Especially a man who watches as much as you do." The threat beneath his words was clear. I'd been noticed, just enjoying the atmosphere, I replied. "Back east, there's nothing quite like this." "East, is it? What brings a man like you to Deadwood? Looking for a fresh start, same as most." I took a calculated risk. "Though I hear there's good money to be made for a man who knows how to stay quiet and look the other way." Dawson's eyes narrowed, evaluating. "Perhaps, though trust needs to be earned in these parts." "Fair enough," I nodded, allowing a small smile. "I'm a patient man." As Dawson left, I caught Sarah watching our interaction with concern in her eyes. Later, as she swept near my table, she whispered without looking at me, "Be careful with him. Mr. Carter, men who ask too many questions don't tend to last long around here." I nodded almost imperceptibly. My cover was holding, but I needed to accelerate my investigation. The next army supply convoy would be passing nearby in just 2 weeks, and I suspected Dawson's men were planning their biggest heist yet. That night, as I left the saloon, I noticed I wasn't alone. A shadow detached itself from an alley and followed me toward my rented room. I turned down a narrow side street, then stepped into a doorway waiting. When my follower appeared, I stepped out quickly, my revolver pressed against his ribs. "Easy now," I said quietly to the young man barely out of his teens. "Why are you following me?" "Mr. Dawson wants to know where you're staying," he stammered. "Just told me to follow you, that's all." "Tell Mr. Dawson if he wants to know something about me, he can ask me himself," I said, releasing him with a push. "And tell him James Carter doesn't appreciate being followed." As I watched him scurry away, I knew my time as a simple observer was running short. The next phase of my plan would need to begin sooner than I'd anticipated. Tomorrow, I would make my first contact with my army counterpart camped outside town. The pieces were falling into place, but the game was becoming dangerous, and if you've made it this far, partner, you're already deeper into the story than most. so why not ride along for the rest of the journey? Hit that subscribe button and join me in the next chapter. Deadwood's secrets are just getting started. The following week saw a shift in my relationship with the Golden Nugget. After my confrontation with Dawson's young spy, I received an unexpected invitation to join a private poker game in the Saloon's back room. It was a test, I knew, an opportunity for Dawson to observe me more closely while perhaps extracting information. The back room was a stark contrast to the main saloon. Plush carpets from St. Louis, oil lamps casting a warm glow over a polished oak table. 5 men sat around it: Dawson, Sheriff Miller, whose badge seemed to weigh less than the gold coins in front of him, a cattle baron named Thompson, a slick-dressed gambler they called the Professor, and the local banker Fitzgerald. "Gentlemen, our new friend, Mr. Carter," Dawson announced as I entered. I tipped my hat. "Appreciate the invitation." "Any friend of Emmett's is welcome at this table," Sheriff Miller said, though his eyes held suspicion. For 3 hours, I played cautiously, losing small amounts, winning occasionally, enough to appear competent, but not threatening. More importantly, I listened as tongues loosened with whiskey. "Shame about those Indians hitting that army wagon last month," Thompson commented, signaling for another drink. Sheriff Miller snorted. "Indians? Right. Official report says Indians," Dawson interjected smoothly. "Who are we to question the army?" "The army's stretched thin," I offered. "I heard they're bringing in fresh supplies next week. Ammunition, provisions." The room went momentarily silent, and I felt Dawson's eyes calculating. "You hear a lot for a newcomer, Carter," he said finally. I shrugged. "Man in my position learns to listen." "And what position is that exactly?" the sheriff asked. "Let's just say I've had my differences with the law back east," I replied. "Nothing personal against you, Sheriff." This earned chuckles around the table, breaking the tension. As the night progressed, I carefully built my persona as a man running from his past, perhaps willing to participate in new opportunities. After the game broke up, Dawson held me back. "You handled yourself well tonight. Appreciate that." "How would you feel about doing some work? Simple job, good pay." "I might be interested," I said carefully. "Depends on the work. Just riding along with some boys, keeping watch. Tomorrow night, North Trail." His eyes bored into mine. "Interested? Count me in," I replied. The following day, I made my way to the small creek 3 miles outside town where I'd arranged to meet Lieutenant Anderson. The young officer had been my contact since I arrived in the territory, though we'd met only twice before. "They're making their move tomorrow night," I told him, handing over my detailed notes on Dawson's operation. "I've been invited along." Anderson frowned. "That's risky if they discover who you are." "It's the evidence we need," I insisted. 3 soldiers have died in ambushes because of stolen supplies. This ends now. "Captain Reynolds has a detachment camped 12 miles north," Anderson said. "I'll inform him immediately. Have them ready, but hidden. I'll signal with 3 shots when we reach the ambush point. And Lieutenant," I added gravely, "there's a young woman at the saloon, Sarah. When this goes down, make sure she's protected." Anderson nodded. "We'll take care of her." That night, I joined 7 of Dawson's men at a camp in the hills north of town. Their leader, a scarred veteran who introduced himself only as Blackwood, laid out the plan. "Army supply wagon will be passing through Copper Canyon tomorrow at sundown," he explained. 6 soldiers escorting. "We take positions here and here," he pointed to a crude map. "Ambush them quick and clean." "What about the soldiers?" I asked. Blackwood's cold eyes met mine. "No witnesses. That a problem?" "Just making sure I understand the job," I replied steadily. As the men drank and boasted around the campfire, I slipped away to check the perimeter. In the darkness, I hastily scribbled a final note with the exact details of the planned ambush, secured it to my saddled horse, and sent the animal toward Anderson's position with a sharp slap. When I returned to camp, Dawson himself had arrived. He nodded to me, then addressed the group. "Change of plans. We move tonight. Army wagon left early." My blood ran cold. The army wasn't expecting an ambush until tomorrow. Anderson's men wouldn't be in position. "Carter," Dawson called. "You ride with me." As we mounted up, Dawson leaned close to me. "Funny thing happened. One of my boys saw you talking to a soldier by the creek yesterday. I knew then that I might not survive the night, but if I didn't make it back, at least Sarah's testimony could still bring Dawson down. I'd convinced her last night to speak against him, promising army protection. "You've got quite an imagination, Dawson," I said calmly, checking my revolver. "We'll see," he replied as our horses thundered into the night. "This story's heating up faster than a six-shooter in a standoff. If you're hooked, don't just sit in the shadows. Subscribe now and be here when the bullets fly and the truth comes out." The cold night air whipped past as our group of 9 riders galloped toward Copper Canyon. My mind raced faster than our horses. Dawson suspected me, but hadn't moved against me yet. He wanted something, needed something, perhaps confirmation, perhaps to know who else was involved. I kept my face impassive, though beneath my coat I could feel the weight of my marshal's badge against my chest. If everything went according to my contingency plan, Lieutenant Anderson would have found my horse and note by now. But would help arrive in time. The narrow trail forced us to ride single file as we entered the canyon. Jagged walls rose on either side, and the silver moonlight cast long shadows that seemed to reach for us like grasping hands. Ahead, I could hear the rumble of wagon wheels echoing off stone. "Hold up," Blackwood hissed, raising his hand. Our group stopped and dismounted, tying our horses to scrub brush. Dawson gripped my arm as the others moved forward. "You stay with me, Carter." "Don't trust me?" I asked quietly. "Let's just say I like to keep my friends close," he replied, his revolver now visible in his hand. We moved to a ledge overlooking the trail below. In the distance, I could see the approaching army wagon, lanterns swinging as it rolled toward us. My heart sank as I counted only 4 soldiers, an easy target for Dawson's gang. "Any minute now," Dawson whispered. "Blackwood and the boys will open fire from the north bend. Clean and quick." I needed to warn the soldiers, but Dawson's eyes never left me. His grip on his pistol tightened. "You know, Carter," he said conversationally, "I've been in this territory for 12 years. Know what I've learned? Everyone has a price. Is that right?" "Almost everyone," he corrected himself. "Marshals, though, they're a problem. Too full of righteousness." My hand inched toward my own weapon. "Sounds like you've met a few." "More than I'd like," he admitted. "Spotted. You for one the second week. A man who nurses 1 whiskey all night is either broke or working." The wagon was drawing closer. I had seconds to act. "So what now?" I asked. "Now you tell me who else knows about my operation, and I might let you walk out of this canyon." "Dawson," I said quietly, "there's an army detachment that knows everything. They're probably surrounding us right now." He laughed. "Nice try. I have men watching all the trails, no army for 20 miles. A shot rang out from the bend ahead. The attack had begun. With a swift motion I drew and fired, not at Dawson but into the air. 3 rapid shots echoed through the canyon. Dawson's eyes widened in rage. He fired at me as I dove for cover behind a boulder. His bullet grazed my shoulder, sending sharp pain down my arm. Below, chaos erupted. The soldiers had taken defensive positions behind their wagon. Gunfire echoed off the canyon walls, creating a deafening cacophony. Dawson fired again, chipping. Stone near my head. "You're dead, Marshal!" I caught a glimpse of movement at the canyon's north entrance, riders approaching fast. My signal had worked. Lieutenant Anderson had found a way through. "It's over, Dawson," I shouted. "Army's here." "Like hell," he snarled, but I could hear the doubt in his voice as he, too, noticed the approaching riders. Taking advantage of his distraction, I rolled to a firing position and got off a clean shot. Dawson cried out, his gun hand bloody and empty, his revolver spinning away across the rocks. Moments later, soldiers swarmed the canyon from both directions. Dawson's men, caught in the crossfire, quickly surrendered. Only Blackwood tried to escape, spurring his horse up a side trail, only to be cut down by carbine fire. I approached Dawson, who sat clutching his bleeding hand, his face a mask of hatred. "Federal Marshal James Reynolds," I said, finally revealing my full name as I displayed my badge. "Emmett Dawson, you're under arrest for theft of government property, conspiracy to ambush Army personnel, and the murders of 3 soldiers. This isn't over," he spat, as 2 soldiers hauled him to his feet. Lieutenant Anderson approached, his uniform dusty from hard riding. "Marshal, we almost didn't make it. Lucky we were already moving the detachment up when your horse found us." "Good work, Lieutenant," I said, wincing as a medic began examining my shoulder. "The woman you mentioned, Sarah, she's safe. We had a man watching the saloon as you requested." 3 days later, I stood at the edge of town, watching as Dawson and his captured men, chained together, were loaded onto a prison wagon bound for the territorial capital where they would stand trial. Sarah, now a key witness, would be traveling on the eastbound stage, returning to her family in Missouri with Army protection until the trial. She approached me as I stood watching the preparations. "I never thanked you properly," she said. "For giving me a way out." "You gave yourself a way out when you decided to testify," I replied. "What will you do now, Marshal Reynolds?" she asked. I looked out at the dusty streets of Deadwood, at the Golden Nugget. Closed now, its windows boarded. Up. "There are other saloons, other towns," I said. "Other men like Dawson who think they're above the law. And you'll sit quietly in their corners watching." I smiled. "It's what I do best." As the prison wagon pulled away, Sheriff Miller, who had been arrested as an accomplice but was now cooperating in exchange for leniency, approached me. "You know, Reynolds, for weeks I thought you were just some eastern dandy trying to disappear out west," he said. "Never figured you for a federal marshal." "That was the idea, Sheriff." He shook his head. "All that time you were building a case, piece by piece. Must take patience." "Justice usually does," I replied, mounting my horse, "though sometimes it needs a little help from the Army." As I rode out of Deadwood, I reflected on the weeks I'd spent watching from that quiet corner of the saloon. People rarely notice the quiet ones, the observers, which makes us the most dangerous allies of justice on this wild frontier. Behind me, the town grew smaller in the distance. Ahead lay my next assignment, my next saloon, my next quiet corner. The West was still wild, but men like me were slowly taming it, one criminal at a time.